Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Coffee Chat with CastleHill. Today I'm joined by Mike Duggan, my partner at CastleHill, and Justin Riehl, the third party risk management head at CastleHill as well. I'm going to be talking about issue management because issue management's a conversation that we're really having a lot with our customers and with our prospects because it's something which a small or medium-sized company often struggles with. It's a difficult activity for those companies to get their arms around. It's not someone's day job. And an issue overall is something which impacts such a wide part of an organization, so many different elements of a business. It's really critical to make sure that you're managing them effectively. So it's just something we're going to talk a little bit about how our GRC as a service gold offering for issue management, how it works, how it provides value, and also maybe to help people think about how they work with issues inside their organization. So, Mike, maybe you can lay a little bit of groundwork for us and just talk a little bit about some of the conversations that we've been having with different folks. And I know you have seen a lot of these in the last few weeks.
Yeah, so a lot of our existing client base, as well as prospects that are coming in, one of the conversations we have very frequently is around how do they handle mission management um, with all programs, whether it be your RCSA program, TPRM, whatever it may be. You're generating lots of issues that come out of this. That's just the nature of it, right? And what happens is we in some ways, we look at like third party risk, for example, as three work streams. There's the onboarding exercises, there's the due diligence and assessment in the middle, and then what comes out of that is all the issue management. Well, generally, what happens is by the time that people get through all of those activities, they have no time to deal with the issues that came out of that, which is maybe the most important part of it. You've identified all this risk, you've identified issues that need to be remediated and mitigated, and nobody has the time to do it, or they're not dedicated to it. So these issues pile up. Next thing you know, you've got a mountain of issues that are overdue, and there's nothing worse than identifying issues and doing nothing about them. You've done all this risk management activity, you've done your job, but you didn't see it through. It's like getting to the red zone in football and never scoring. It's the point of this is to take it through all the way to the end. So we're actually talking to a lot of our existing clients and again prospects about this, and how can we help them with seeing it through all the way to the end. So that's what laid the groundwork here, and that's what we wanted to talk about. We have had this offering available for some time, uh, but just recently it's starting to bubble up, and we're hearing more and more about it.
And Justin, maybe you can sort of go beyond that because a lot of our processes in this space and the way in which we do it from a gold perspective, where we're actually helping customers to manage the issues, to document the issues, that comes out of our third party risk process as well. So what talk a little bit about that and also the value of that centralized repository of these issues that can be remediated more effectively.
So for issue management specific to TPRM, that's actually a little bit different than it might normally be where an issue is purely internal. When we're talking about TPRM, a lot of times that issue is aligned to something that the third party needs to do or something that the third party needs to provide. And going back to what Mike said previously, you can collect all of this information and be waiting on something, but as soon as that third party is in the organization, the whole issue management piece seems to stop. Everyone gets a little bit more relaxed about it. But what that does is potentially it leaves you open to exposure from your third party relationship that can be easily mitigated through, a fairly low overhead process around, again, collecting that information, negotiating with the third party with respect to what that remediation might look like, making sure that you're updating their records in whatever platform it is that you're using. So, come contract time, legal or procurement doesn't go into a system or look at a spreadsheet and wonder what they should do when they see that there are, you know, five issues that were written a year ago that nobody actually did anything with. So it leaves this open question, and that can stall your process. It can make you less efficient. It can make it more expensive to re-onboard a third party. So we try to, from a TPRM perspective, we try to avoid that type of scenario by making sure that our team is involved from the beginning, that they're keeping their eye on the issues, applying appropriate reporting, um, coordinating meetings and discussions when necessary, and ultimately getting these things closed out. So when it is time for renewal, there are no open questions. I think that's the important piece: elimination of open questions, and then you can show that to if you're a highly regulated industry. Again, that's something that you can show them to say, look, we do have a process. When we do get to the red zone, we can score, and that's the important piece.
I prefer the final third, but we're just playing different kinds of football. That's all right.
Great.
So that's great background. Thank you again, both of you. So, and Justin, right? That's part of the service that we've had for years, right, at Castle Hill relative to the issue management and the TPRM side. And then that, as you pointed out, that's got a little bit of a slightly different flavor because it's more complicated in some ways because you're dealing with vendors. Although I would argue that most people are dealing with a vendor somewhere in an issue at this point with outsourcing and other, cloud type of providers and SaaS providers of various sorts. So Mike, I mean, maybe just touch a little bit more on that the consistency that we've already applied in the third party risk and now applying that same kind of consistency around documentation and the process and the follow up and all of those things. That's not someone's day job, really in those companies.
Yeah, you think about issue management as a whole, so much of it revolves around uh, just getting the right resources in the room, collaboration and coordination of what needs to happen and who needs to perform those activities, and then documenting all of that so you have a full audit trail of how you closed an issue, how it got to where it's at, and how you closed it out ultimately at the end of the day. All of those things are very important, and feeding those up to those folks that need to know, right? Making informing those people that whether it be an SME, whether it be legal, like Justin pointed out, procurement, somebody needs to know that there is potentially something going on here with this vendor, giving them exposure to the information that they need to make good decisions. That's what this is all about. Most of the time, what we're running into here is it's literally a resourcing problem. It tends to be very administrative in nature, managing issues. There does have to be some expertise and understanding around what the issue means, but most organizations will bring SMEs into that anyways, into those discussions. So a lot of this is administrative and coordination. It's project management. How do I take it from here and finish it off here? It has a beginning and it has an end. So every one of these issues is a little mini project. How do we get them closed out? That requires constant attention. Um, for everybody involved in issue management, it's not their day job. What in the case of TPRM, you might have a vendor relationship manager that's engaged, an SME that was involved in writing up the finding and leading to an issue. Uh, Again, you'll have external parties, like you might have other parties, the vendor being an external party, or other functions like legal and procurement that need to be informed and brought into this whole process. And it is very much a process, and anything that is process can ultimately be outsourced, or a managed service can be provided around it. So that's the reason why we actually came up with it, because it was so process driven, and that's really at the core of it. And you can't underestimate the amount of documentation that you're going to need around this as well. You need to really document what it is you've done in order to go back and be able to recreate what happened here. So the next time you go into an assessment cycle, you know exactly what you're looking for, how it was remediated, to make sure that it truly was remediated. So a lot of things you can do around issue management, but it tends to be an afterthought, and that really shouldn't be the way it should be.
Along those same lines as saying, well, at least in smaller organizations, it's not somebody's day job. I think folks have to recognize also that there's a certain skill set that goes along with this. And so if you have somebody who's aligned to potentially finance or procurement or legal or IT, then their world tends to stay in those specific areas. What's really important is when you have somebody driving issue management, mitigation, resolution. That person has to have a pretty good idea what what the risk landscape looks like across the company and not be biased by their own particular job function. So having somebody in there, the way it is for Castle Hill, where we have a team of issue management specialists they understand RCSA controls, policy, procedures, training. And so they can help these smaller organizations point toward exactly where the concentration has to be. If you give IT an issue, then they'll try to solve it in IT. You give it to procurement, suddenly it's a procurement issue. And the truth is that it's probably not any of those things. They just happen to be dealing with it the way they know how based on their expertise. So bringing in somebody who's not biased by their own job function and establishing a fast path to resolution and an appropriate path, I think is just as important.
And what would you say to both of you, any or either of you, to the a lot of folks that we go into are smaller companies. They have, like as you pointed out, Justin, they may have a list of IT issues, or they might have a list of procurement issues, or they might have a list of XYZ issues, and things like that. So, what's the value of having that centralized, or is it more valuable to keep them separate?
Well, it helps to be centralized because I think, in my opinion, I guess you could do it either way, but it helps to have it centralized again because that person's reach in a non-siloed organization, in a centralized organization like issue management, gives that person freedom to work outside of their own, outside of a specific discipline or domain or business unit, to reach out and touch all of the constituents that may be involved in a remediation or an escalation, to tell you the truth, if it's something big. So in that particular instance, I would say that a version of centralized is probably a better approach than trying to do this in a silo. Otherwise, you just don't have the reach into the organization you need to eliminate these issues quickly.
I think there's another component of the centralization of it. Risk acceptance comes into play all the time, right? You get an issue, who's going to what at what point is it risk accepted? At what point does it need to be remediated? And different by bringing in having a centralized function and bringing in all the SME groups or those stakeholders involved with the issue, um, you can get to a point where maybe one person might have a different view of what the risk acceptance should be, the correct criteria for that, versus another person. And that in itself has to be remediated in making sure that there's clear definition around what can be risk accepted, what can't be, what the risk appetite of the organization is. There's so much of that that comes into play as well with this. Not every issue has to be remediated. In a lot of cases, there will be risk acceptance, and that has to be agreed upon, and again, well documented. Why did we do that? Why did we risk accept this? Why are we not going out to remediate it?
And really, there are a number of statuses that an issue can have. You can risk avoid, you could transfer, you can do all of these different things. And I think that's important for people to understand. They have an issue that they feel that they need to remediate. Well, maybe they don't need to remediate it necessarily. Maybe there's something else that we can do and appropriately, kick it down the road for a period of time or have a good escalation process. So when you have a team like a Castle Hill team, um, you may go into an organization and they may have some sort of de facto process, but really it works better for everybody. It works a lot better for us if we can work with them to identify where maybe their process breaks down and give them different options, give them different paths to resolution. Again, it's all about, efficiency, process engineering. It doesn't have to be high overhead. It can be low overhead. That's not a problem. But you have to make sure that your process involves all of the options that you have for eliminating an issue or kicking it down the road, as they say. But you have to know what your options are, what's appropriate, what's not, when it's appropriate, when it isn't. So coming in and helping folks with that program so that they see it's not just one way to do things. I think that's super beneficial as well.
Yeah, and oftentimes there are mitigating controls in place within the organization, and if those aren't taken into consideration, especially in the case of a third party, an issue related to a third party finding, uh, then you're potentially remediating something that you don't have to remediate. You're creating more work with not enough value.
Yeah, you may want to improve a control, but you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. You're probably closer to that than you think you are.
Oftentimes, right?
Yep.
So You guys have both talked a lot about the process aspects of it, right? The fact that we need that horizontal. I think the other piece about a centralized process is the ability for senior management to have a single view of the information, what actions are outstanding, and as you said, realize that they need to make a business decision. It may be a transfer, an acceptance, or some other control and improvements. So how does this help those folks, those executives, see the forest for the trees?
Well, I mean, depending on what you're using, whether you're using Excel to do this, which you probably shouldn't, or if you're using a platform, again, going back to the question about whether or not it should be siloed or um, centralized in the organization, you need to have one area where all that information flows into, so that the reporting that flows out is complete. We go into a lot of organizations where there might be 3 or 4 different attempts at issue management, and the reporting coming out of each one of those different areas is incomplete. So this gives you an opportunity to tie everything together. If your organization works through a RACI of some kind, then you can fully inform that RACI. That's something that's just not possible when you have small groups of people scattered throughout your organization trying to pull together some type of reconciliation for issues. And that's actually been one of the big pieces where we've been able to help a lot, is in the reporting, keeping everybody informed, so that when something does come up, what was the example that we had earlier, procurement or legal or IT or whatever, we want to make sure that there aren't any surprises. Everyone's informed before anything ever becomes a surprise.
That's exactly right. Being able to report and provide dashboards to the governance committees that are overseeing these functions, that are these risk programs, is critical. Um, so often I hear it that we just don't have visibility. We don't know what's wrong, right? We don't know what needs to be fixed. Everybody operating independently from one another until the surprise happens. Something bubbles up and it's a surprise. It usually comes in the form of a regulatory finding, or something that now requires people to react, as opposed to staying on top of it, being a bit more proactive about it, and getting good reporting that they can operate off of to make sure that things are moving, that things don't get stalled, because this is a process that can easily stall.
Yeah, and if you don't have visibility, then your regulators don't have visibility. If you're regulated, your auditors don't have visibility. The people who need to make those decisions, leadership, executives, they don't have visibility. So, this is a product. Reporting is one of those products that's completely reusable, and frankly, it takes a lot of overhead out of any type of audit function, whether it's internal or external.
I know we wanted to do this as relatively short today, just to give people a sense of this. So, thank you, gentlemen, for the good conversation. Just to recap, this is an overlooked part of many organizations. Having this as a centralized function, having that ability to get the visibility back to senior management, get the visibility to key stakeholders in the organization who actually have to execute these remediations. It's not your day job. So call CastleHill. We can help drive all those things, get appropriate documentation, create those understandable remediation plans, and help to see it through and make sure that you have the right awareness of risk and that you're managing that with the appropriate controls and action. I think it's a great offering for our customers, and definitely want to keep people aware of the better ways to do this, even if they don't decide to call us. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, appreciate it.
I hope that you enjoyed this week's episode of Coffee Chat with CastleHill. For more episodes, insights, and discussion, check us out on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, or at our website, www.castlehillrisk.com. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll see you next time on a Coffee Chat with CastleHill.